Hello everyone, my name is Mahmoud Gassim and I have been a physics instructor here at South Texas College for the last 10 years. I enjoy what I'm doing, and that's basically teaching physics to my students. A few days ago, I was called by Mr. Manuel Riza, who is the chair of this committee, to prepare a few minutes video clip about my teaching practice. I wish you have the time to come to my class and at least to see how I interact with my students, but I know that everybody is busy these days and the time does not permit for that, so that's why I'm doing this one in a video clip. Having said that, now I'm going to talk about my teaching practice. But before I do that, if we look at the universe as a whole, the universe is made up of two things. Matter, which is basically everything around us, including us, and energy. And we know that energy is the mover of matter. For me, I'm going to go even further, and that is basically, I'm going to say that the world we live in is made up of three things: people, resources, and education. And to me, education is the driving force of people in general to use these resources and to be very innovative in general. To have a good education, of course, you need good teachers and good teaching practices, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. My teaching practice basically is divided into two parts: lecture and outside projects. The lecture portion, basically, usually I start my lecture with a preview of what we talked about in the previous lecture, and that is just to ensure continuity of the lecture. Then after that, I give the class a clear instruction about the lecture itself, followed by some examples and some problem solving at the end of the lecture, or some kind of a discussion, just to see if the students grasped the concepts that we talked about in the lecture. The other thing is I try always to give my students some kind of a feedback, and that's very, very important, so at least they will know where they are going wrong. For example, if I give them a test, or a quiz, or a homework, and they did some mistakes, I have to point those to them, so at least they can correct themselves in the future. The other thing is I try always to raise my expectations so that hoping the students will work even harder and harder. And last but not least, I try always to engage my students in some kind of a discussion in the class. I try to encourage them to ask questions and have some kind of a discussion in the class just to see if they are following the lecture or not. The other part to the lecture, basically, usually the lecture is tied to a lab, and for the lab, I usually divide the class into 2 groups or 4 groups. It depends how large is the class is, basically. And they have to work in a group setting, they have to do an experiment, and they have to write reports and so on and so forth. And that's basically, again, to reinforce the concepts that we did in the lecture. The second part of my teaching practice is an outside projects, usually. Usually I assign a project to the class, and the students, they have to work on it outside the class, and that will give them a chance to work in a group setting and to discuss or to use the concepts that we use in the class in these projects. Some of these projects that we did are we did about 2 go-karts. We did a hovercraft. We did a blackboard where we use a remote control to erase the whole board. We did the can crusher, and I remember there's some kind of a sensor there, so if your hand is on the way, automatically the can crusher will shut off. We did the nail gun, we did the robotic arm, and so on and so forth. And there's, at the end of this presentation, there's a few slides and maybe a video clip showing these projects that we did in the class. Finally, I just want to thank every one of you for taking the time to serve in this committee. Thank you very much, and goodbye.